Hello, and welcome to episode 9 of the In the Clutch podcast. My name is Drew Clutchy, and I'm here alongside my co host, Jeremy Wilson. Now, you may think that on the morning of Saturday, February 12th, we're going to talk about the passing of the NBA trade deadline, just like every other NBA podcast this week. And you would be correct. What do you think of the James Harden for Ben Simmons trade, Jer?
I like it for both teams. I think the Nets get three starters out of it. Like you're gonna put Andre Drummond becomes the best center on your roster. You get more shooting to come along with Ben Simmons, which is always nice. And you get Ben Simmons who actually wants to be there versus James Harden who did not. So I think I like the trade for the Nets. I'm not sure if it makes them better or worse. I guess time will tell. But I obviously like the trade for the 76ers because you go from Ben Simmons at net nothing to James Harden. So basically, in terms of caliber of players that you traded that were helping your team, it was Seth Curry and Andre Drummond for James Harden. And I don't think anybody would complain about that trade.
The only flaw I see with acquiring Harden is that you have to pay Harden. So Harden's going to be making, assuming that Sixers elect to pay him, which I imagine they will because they knew his contract was going to expire. They're going to have to pay him close to $60 million at age 38. So I think that'll become the new Russell Westbrook, John Wall, and for a brief moment it was the Chris Paul contract as well, where you have this guard who's making well over the max of everybody else, and he's getting older, and the decline in production is going down. So it becomes this untradeable contract of a 38-year-old James Harden who's making $60 million a year.
Right. The one positive thing, I guess, about that is they don't have to pay him yet. So as part of the deal, James Harden opted into his player option for next year, which is something like 47 million, which don't get me wrong, is still ridiculous.
Right.
But they don't have to extend his contract quite yet. And James Harden and Joel Embiid's got to make you almost a favorite or a co-favorite in the Eastern Conference.
Right. I just think they gave up too much because the other couple elements of where I think this deal went wrong for Daryl Morey and Philly is that let's say Ben Simmons is a wash this year. Like he just, for the fun of it, I know he is actually apparently, according to ESPN's Ramona Shelburne, he's actually in great shape and he's been working out all over the Philly area. So physically, he's ready to go. Whether or not mentally he gets into a condition in which he can play, we'll have to wait and see. But let's say he plays this year, not great, like 10 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists or something, just for the fun of it. Then you still have Seth Curry. And like you said, Andre Drummond is now the best center on that roster. And Andre Drummond, when he's been backing up Joel Embiid, has been like above serviceable. Like he's been a good center. He's had some like 20 and 20, close to 20 and 20 games, and he gets a lot of steals. He's a great defensive player. So I think that was a really valuable piece to give up. And then the other really valuable piece to give up was Seth Curry. And then the 2 first round picks. So I feel like Philadelphia, because you have to compare not only in what Brooklyn gains, but what Philadelphia loses, because Philadelphia, in theory, has to go through Brooklyn to win the championship. So not only is Philadelphia losing a great backup center for Embiid, so when you know that Embiid's off the court, you've got Drummond in there who can absolutely hold down the fort. They're losing one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. And then you're right, Simmons was obviously net zero. But then they've also mortgaged their future, and they're likely going to have to pay James Harden. So if you look at what Brooklyn's starting lineup could be, you have Seth Curry, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, and Drummond, which is a great starting five. But not only is that a great starting five, Simmons is young. So that's presumably the starting five. Like I said, if this year's a wash, for the next 2 or 3 years, that's the starting five. And you gave them 2 first round picks. So they can trade the first round picks, or if the whole thing doesn't work out, then they just break everybody down, move Simmons, and move on from it, and they have picks.
Right. And I can see, I guess, both sides of that where as the 76ers, I feel like even though it might be seen that they gave up too much, they still got better because Ben Simmons was giving them nothing. So Ben Simmons is a great player and was a lot to like a big piece of the trade, obviously the biggest piece on the 76ers side, but he was still not going to play for them. I think the biggest potential loss in this trade is if the Nets and the 76ers meet in the playoffs and the 76ers beat them. That becomes a total embarrassment for the Nets front office
Well, and for Kevin Durant.
and for Kevin Durant.
Which, that whole thing, it really is interesting to me that this is the best basketball team that we never really saw. Like, I believe they only played like a total of 16 games together or 20 something. Like, it was such a low number over the 2 or 3 years. Well, I guess they were only together for 2 years, or for just over 1 season, I guess, with all 3 of them. But even Kevin Durant and Kyrie didn't play that many games together. But I think in the NBA community, we have to shift what we're calling a big 3. Because if somebody was an all-star 5 years ago, that's not a big 3 anymore. So obviously, in my opinion, Brooklyn had a big 3 because Kyrie, KD, and Harden were all incredible. Brooklyn, in my opinion, does not have a big 3 right now because we don't know if Ben Simmons comes back, is immediately playing great, then right away they have a big 3. But assuming if we get won't shoot in the fourth quarter Ben Simmons that we saw in games 5, 6, and 7 against Atlanta, then Brooklyn doesn't have a big 3. Similarly, I feel the Lakers don't have a big 3 because current Russell Westbrook is not a big 3 player. He's no longer an all-star caliber player. So they don't have a big the Lakers don't have a big 3. So everybody's talking about, oh, the big 3 for the Lakers have to get it done. It's not a big 3. It's a dynamic duo with a good role player.
Well, I can agree with you on at least the Lakers' big 3. I cannot on Brooklyn because in terms of Brooklyn, the 2 players you're talking about, if you're an all-star 5 years ago, it doesn't count. Sure, but Ben Simmons and Kyrie were both all-stars last year.
Right, but I just think we have to see, like I said, you can literally consider Brooklyn a big 3 after Ben Simmons plays 4 games and is averaging 18, 8, and 8. Sure, then assuming he's still playing great defense, which he will be. Sure, big 3. But I think at this exact moment, it's a fluid thing. We haven't seen him play in a year.
Right, but at this point, I'm going to assume that he's going to be essentially what he has been in the past years.
Right.
So I'm prepared to consider Brooklyn still a big 3. I saw somebody, it was just a post on Instagram that I saw, and it had a picture of Ben Simmons, Kyrie, and Kevin Durant. It was like, this is a championship team to you guys? And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
You're talking about a superstar, 2 all-stars, including an all-NBA defender? Yes, it's the championship team to me.
Yep, I absolutely count that. And not to mention one piece that I forgot to mention as I was going over Brooklyn. They still have Joe Harris. Like, he's hurt, and he's been out for the year, and I think it was like a typical 6 to 8 weeks or something, and then now it's been 8 to 12 weeks, and we're still waiting for Joe Harris to come back. So even if he doesn't play again this year, they still have him. So even if they want to start Kyrie, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant, Ben Simmons, Drummond, and then you Seth Curry off the bench. Like, I think
Joe Harris is potentially out for the year.
Well, I haven't seen that update, but I think he will be based on the fact that he hasn't come back already. But I think to me, the deal is just Philly gave up too much because not only did they give up to give Brooklyn an incredible lineup, but they gave up the picks. So if the lineup doesn't work out for Brooklyn, they could trade the picks to make it even stronger, or they can give up and take the picks and rebuild. So I think you just put all of the cards in Brooklyn's hands to then have Harden and Embiid and really pray that you win a championship because you're going to be paying Harden until he's an old man.
Right, and I mean, the closing lineup in terms of Ben Simmons not being able to shoot free throws, if Joe Harris comes back, becomes a lot less of a liability. You can almost start Simmons as like a Draymond Green style small ball big,
right,
and have him inbound the ball so he doesn't have to get fouled instantly,
right.
and then have Kyrie, Seth Curry, Joe Harris, and Kevin Durant on the floor with them, all of whom I'm sure are like 85+% free throw shooters.
Exactly. So I just think on Brooklyn's end, it was just too much to give up. Or sorry, on Philly's end, it was too much to give up, and especially too much to give up to a team in your conference. Because you won't even make the NBA Finals if you have to go through them.
Sorry, did you say that about the Nets or the 76ers?
The 76ers.
76ers.
They gave up too much, and they'd be able to make the NBA Finals because they're going to have to go through this loaded Brooklyn team.
Well, if they run into Brooklyn in the playoffs, no matter who the 76ers play in the playoffs, I'm just checking in my head to make sure this is right. They will have two of the three best players on the floor at any given time.
You said other than Brooklyn,
No, including Brooklyn.
they'll have two of the three.
Two of the three. So whether that's 1 and 3 or 2 and 3 or one and
Yeah.
two,
No.
but
Yep. You're right on that. Yep. I also did the same mental check. I'm looking up at the ceiling here, counting teams in my head.
yeah. So in terms of that, like it's hard to argue that top end talent doesn't win a heck of a lot of playoff games.
Right.
So if you have two of the three best players, I'm not sure you can necessarily like if they met the Nets in the playoffs, I think I would pick the Nets. But I'm not gonna totally count the 76ers out.
Well, the only other thing is the Harden and B pick and roll that everybody talks about. Which don't get me wrong, the Harden and Embiid pick and roll is going to be incredible.
Agreed.
But Embiid isn't a rim runner like Clint Capella was in Houston. Embiid's like a pick and roll to the elbow free throw line area and then get the ball back. And Harden is a pick and then I'm either going to score or throw an alley oop.
Right.
So I think there's going to be a learning curve on the Brooklyn pick and roll
For
because
sure.
obviously it'll work. Both players are A+ talents offensively, like, and one's a dominant guard and the other's one of the most dominant bigs we've seen in 20 years. So it'll work. But I think there's going to be a learning curve where they adjust the fact that in pick and roll, effectively because Embiid only rolls to the elbow, they both want the ball.
Right. And yeah, of course there's gonna be somewhat of a learning curve, but you'd assume with two players that caliber that they'll figure it out.
Right.
In terms of like we saw Kevin Durant, who was probably never the screener in pick and roll in his life before he met Steph Curry, and then the Steph Curry Kevin Durant pick and roll or pick and pop was absolutely devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think you're right. They'll figure it out. Which to me, this brings forward an interesting point. The Eastern Conference is terrifying. So, if you assume that the Knicks are out in terms of they're just not going to rally around and make anything work, they traded Burks away, kind of thing, and
I
the
think we can
Wizards
count
are out.
Washington out too because of Beal. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Wizards Beal's out for the season. So if you go top down, and I'm not going to go in the order of the current standings. I'm going to go in just the general order of the scariness of the teams. So there's the Miami Heat, which frankly the Miami Heat are having an awesome year. They're just well made. So there's that aspect of it. And then you have Milwaukee, the Nets. Charlotte is just deep right across the board now. They added Harrell this week, which we'll get into later in the pod. The Chicago Bulls, which they have all-star DeMar DeRozan and all-star Zach LaVine. The Celtics are there. The Raptors are making a surge and are fairly deep. They have one all-star, almost had two. The Cavs have the Rookie of the Year. They're the likely Rookie of the Year, I guess we'll call it. And Atlanta, who was in the conference finals last year.
Right, yeah, it's a very interesting scenario where I don't think, other than maybe Charlotte and maybe Atlanta, like currently of the top 8 teams, I don't think anybody in the top 4 wants to play anybody in the bottom 4.
And vice versa, honestly. I think nobody in the East wants the playoffs to happen. Because I don't think there's a single Eastern Conference team that's confident that they'll win.
I think for the first time in a little while, the Eastern Conference is clearly better than the Western Conference.
Oh, it's not even close.
Because
the Clippers are the 8th seed in the Western Conference.
Yeah,
and that's without Paul George and without Kawhi.
Yeah. And then Denver's good, but I wouldn't necessarily consider them scary with a Jamal Murray. Dallas, again, good, but are they scary with really just Luka and not really playing
Luka and Spencer Dinwiddie?
Luka and Spencer Dinwiddie, which we'll get to.
To touch on the Nuggets as well, no Michael Porter Jr. either.
Right. And then
so
Utah
really
has kind of fallen off recently. And Memphis is really good, but young. So are they a scary playoff team? I guess only time will tell. But
right. So now that we've gone over Harden Simmons, which that was the most recent trade so it was the last trade of the NBA season for 2021-2022. We'll just kind of pop down the list here and kind of talk about each trade as we see fit. So the trade before that on Feb 10th was the Mavericks sent Porzingis and a second round pick for Spencer Dinwiddie and Bertans.
Yeah, I don't understand it for either team.
Neither do I.
So,
Well, I guess I get it for the Wizards.
like the Mavericks wanted a secondary ball handler and a secondary playmaker, but I thought Jalen Brunson was
So
doing
did
a pretty solid job of that.
My fantasy team thinks Jalen Brunson's doing a great job at that. So
And Spencer Dinwiddie is averaging 12 and a half and 6 and 5 essentially on bad shooting splits. So I think he's a good player. I think he's having a bad year.
right.
But I guess if Porzingis and Luka just didn't get along, you get Davis Bertans, who's like Porzingis if you took away most of his skill, but left
And
him
height.
with the shooting and the height.
No, Porzingis
Well,
is
shooting
7'3".
in 5 inches,
Yeah.
inches shorter,
Yeah,
I guess.
less height.
And then I guess the Wizards are saying, hey, why don't we run this with Porzingis and Beal next year?
Yeah, well, they're trying to do what the Mavericks have done, right? Just give Porzingis the change of scenery, and then see if he can make it work with Bradley Beal, because he couldn't make it work with Doncic. Which that actually makes sense to me, because similarly how I don't get it for the Mavericks, because Dinwiddie and Bertans doesn't make you better than Porzingis. I get it for the Wizards because Dinwiddie and Bertans and Beal isn't better than Porzingis and Beal. So I see why they're doing it and just hoping that a change of scenery for Porzingis is enough to bring him back to like the New York Knicks Porzingis.
Right.
But I get it for the Wizards, but I don't see it for the Mavericks.
I mean, without Beal, Porzingis gets to kind of run. He'll be the best player on the Wizards, hopefully,
Right.
for the remainder of this season. So hopefully you see him kind of become what he used to be again. But I guess
Right.
we'll
Well,
see.
he'll be the primary option. And then the other thing too, I guess that maybe the Mavericks are looking for is they get 2 more tradable contracts. Because a team like the
Right.
Lakers or something who needs another guard would be interested in Dinwiddie, and then Bertans you could just move pretty much for anything. So because Luka's so young, the Mavs might just be looking to hit free agency in a year or two and try to find a different co-star for Luka.
Right.
So obviously, in my opinion, and it seems like in your opinion as well, the Mavs didn't get better in this trade, but they might just be looking more 1 to 2 to 3 years away to really just make a dent there.
Right. Like if you're thinking that, hey, we're good, but we're not good enough to win a playoff round, this trade's not going to drop you a whole lot, if at all, in the standings.
Right.
And then if you end up as the 5 or the 6 seed, you lose in the first round, and then you hit free agency and you try to do something with it, then I guess that is what it is.
Yep, no, exactly. So then February 10th, Celtics add point guard Derek White from San Antonio, and the Spurs add Josh Richardson, Romeo Langford, and 2 picks.
That feels like a lot for Derek White.
I thought it was a great trade for the Spurs. Because my number one complaint with the Celtics is that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum don't have somebody to handle the ball, and Marcus Smart is not the person that should be handling the ball. So I think no matter what they had to give up, Derek White, I think, similar almost to Spencer Dinwiddie. He's just like a solid NBA point guard, and all the Celtics need, because they have their 3-and-D and Marcus Smart and their 2-star wings, is a solid NBA point guard.
Right, but how much better do you think this trade really makes the Celtics?
One position. So, let's say they were going to
Right.
be the 6th seed. I'd put them the 5th seed. I think it moves them up just that little bit. Because right now, they have Marcus Smart on the ball handling duties, which doesn't work because, A, he's just not like a great passer ball handler, and B, poor decision making. So, I think having that person to take the stress off of Brown and Tatum, and also to a degree Smart, I
Right.
think makes enough of a dent, moves them up 1 spot. So you're right. I don't think, wow, all of a sudden they're going to be in the conference finals now over the Heat or the Bucks or the Nets or the Sixers. But I think if they were maybe going to get booted, or they were definitely going to be booted in the first round, they might be able to take it further, maybe squeak into the second round now.
Right.
And let's face it. Sorry, go ahead.
I like the trade for the Spurs too. You get Josh Richardson, who's like Josh Richardson is fine. You take a shot on young Romeo Langford, and then you get a protected first and a pick swap. So I have no issue with this trade for the Spurs.
Well, that's what I mean, and it doesn't really, frankly, that doesn't really cost the Celtics anything. So now you look at the starting five of the Celtics, where they have White, who's an actual point guard, and then Marcus Smart gets to slide back to his normal shooting guard position, Brown and Tatum, and then Robert Williams, who's up and coming. I think that gives you, well, I guess some people would argue he's up and already there, but that gives you a more solid starting five where everybody gets to shift back to kind of their more natural position, and hopefully it just gives the Celtics some better flow.
This Celtics team is the same as it was 2 years ago when they played Toronto in the playoffs and worse at point game. It's the exact same. You get the same starting lineup. Tice is on the team versus Robert Williams, whichever one you want to start, and Derek White instead of Kemba.
Well, this is going to get interesting. A, I'd like to point out that the Celtics beat the Raptors. So they did get to the second round. And B,
Yes.
just to make it even add another layer, the next trade on February 10th, the Celtics did add Daniel Tice in exchange for Schroeder, Ennis
Yeah.
Freedom, and Fernando. So they actually have, it could be Tice again. So
Yeah,
it might
exactly.
literally just be Kemba, or White instead of Kemba.
And I don't think people are going to argue that White right now is better than Kemba was 2 years ago.
Oh, I think White's equally as good as Kemba was 2 years ago. Mind you, Kemba went off in the bubble. But excluding that, Kemba as a whole, including the regular season, I think White is as good as Kemba was. Because Kemba still had a lot of knee problems back then.
So you think this team is basically the exact same caliber of team that the Celtics
Well,
had 2 years ago?
I think they're a little okay. So let's assume Kemba really went off in the bubble. So I think they're going to be just as good as they were in the bubble, including the fact that Kemba went off, because Derek White is a little bit worse than bubble Kemba, but Robert Williams is a better backup center than I think they had Al Horford at the time. Or if you want to start Robert Williams, then have
They
Daniel
actually had
Tice as a
Robert Williams as the backup center. So
well, okay, Robert Williams is a better player than he was at that time. So he might
yeah, I
start
agree.
now and have Tice off the bench or whatever. So I think they're just as good as they were in the bubble, and that got them out of the first round.
Yeah, I got them out of the first round 2 years ago, but now every team in the top eight is better than Toronto was 2 years ago, including Toronto.
Yeah, but Tatum and Brown are better, and like I guess slightly better. They're pretty much.
I don't know.
doing the same
Tatum
thing.
seems worse than
Yeah,
last year.
but I don't know. So I think it's enough to get them out of the first round, and then
I disagree.
it's enough to put them in the running to maybe get out of the first round. But before acquiring that point guard, I thought they weren't going to get out of the first round at all.
Right, and they did need a point guard. I see that.
So
So
I think,
I do
given the
understand the
assets
take,
they
but
had and given the positioning they're in, I thought that was actually the perfect trade they could have made. I have no complaints on that Celtics trade.
and like I guess we already really touched on the next trade. The Tice back to the Celtics for Dan Schroeder, Ennis Freedom, and Bruno Fernando.
Same
Uh,
thing.
those of you who don't know who Ennis Freedom is, you may recognize Ennis Cantor. He's changed his last name.
Yeah.
So in terms of this, Boston gets out of they need to move Dan Schroeder for salary reasons. So he's off the team now. And then Daniel Tice is a quality backup or fine starting center, wherever you want to put him.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think so. Same thing. I think that was just a good trade. Obviously, they probably knew they were bringing in White. So then you move Schroeder out of there to make room for White, and then same thing, just get a decent player in return that can be in your rotation. So I think the Celtics, given what they had and the positioning they're in the Eastern Conference this year, I think they did a great job at the deadline.
Yeah, I think that they're basically the same quality of team. I don't really have any positive or negative feelings about their trades. I think they're just fine.
Right.
So this next trade is a big one. This is a 4-team trade. The Bucks acquire Serge Ibaka in 2 seconds. Clippers get Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye, and Banja Marinkovic. Kings get Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Jackson, Trey Lyles, David Michino, and a second. And the Pistons get Marvin Bagley. So I'll just run through the big kind of players in that trade again. Bucks get Ibaka, Kings get DiVincenzo, Pistons get Bagley, and the Clippers get Rodney Hood and Semi Ojeleye.
Yeah, to me, that deal. So, okay, I'll start where it's easiest to unravel it. So, Pistons get Marvin Bagley. Same thing, kind of like the Porzingis thing on a lesser degree. Hopefully, change your scenery. He wasn't doing anything in Sacramento. So, hopefully, you can pair him with Cade and Jeremy Grant and make it work at the Pistons. Because obviously, Bagley was a really high first round pick. So, that's pretty straightforward to me, what they get. Um, then the Bucks bringing in Ibaka is really interesting because that brings into questions whether or not we're going to see Brook Lopez again this year, who is struggling with back issues. So obviously, Serge Ibaka is essentially Brook Lopez, where he's a 3-point rim protector at center. He can shoot the three ball, he can shoot a little bit of mid range, and he can protect the rim on defense. But the interesting thing is he's really like Brook Lopez in terms of he's a 3-point rim protector with back issues. So I think it'll be interesting. It'll basically, to me, on that deal, it comes down to whether or not we see like Toronto Raptors championship Ibaka, or whether or not we see like what we've seen on the Clippers Ibaka, which is not the same player anymore. So if he can flip the switch in the playoffs, I think it's a great deal for the Bucks, obviously, to be able to fill that void and play him alongside Giannis. And if he can't, then it'll be like a wow. There's any number of players for this now, but it'll be like a Carmelo Anthony or Dwight Howard or DeAndre Jordan or Blake Griffin or whatever you want to call it, where it's just like the veteran player. It's not the same guy anymore.
Right.
So then, do you want to unpack the Clippers and the Kings on this end?
Yeah, I do like this trade for the Kings, given the Sabonis trade, which I don't especially like for the Kings. But in which they acquired Sabonis, traded away two guards. So they now have Sabonis and Rashawn Holmes to say they didn't need Marvin Bagley anymore. So Marvin Bagley gets moved. Marvin Bagley had some issues with the coaching anyway. And they get Dante DiVincenzo, who's still young, can fill that role of shooting guard, maybe slash small forward. I think he's like 6'6" or so. And he's starting lineup. Josh Jackson, Trey Lyles, and David Mashno are kind of, fillers for me. If they like them, then good. They'll know a lot better than I do about those players.
Right.
And then I don't really understand if the Clippers got better here. I guess all they really gave up was Serge Ibaka and David Mashno to the Kings, and they got Rodney Hood, Semi Ojeleye, and Vanja Marinkovic, who I've never heard of. And Rodney Hood can be a solid real player. I guess maybe Semi Ojeleye can be too. I don't love this trade for the Clippers, but I don't hate it, so it's just kind of a neutral thing for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. You had a shooter, and obviously like they're paying Ibaka a lot, and Kawhi and PG just frankly aren't there, so it kind of makes sense to me for the Clippers just to move some salary off. I feel bad for DiVincenzo because he was like part of after the Brogdon era of the Bucks, like Brogdon, Middleton, and Giannis. DiVincenzo was then a part, kind of more of a significant piece on that era of the Bucks, and then he didn't play in the playoffs because he was hurt, and then they won the championship, and he was hurt the whole time. And then now, because he was still hurt most of this year, they've moved on to Grayson Allen. So he just kind of lost his spot on the team. So he's still an NBA champion, but I think it's too bad that he just really missed out on his opportunity here because now he's going to Sacramento. And then the other thing is, like, not only is he going to Sacramento, but, like, obviously the Bucks are going to be good for a lot of years to come with Giannis, signed on a Supermax. So he just really missed that opportunity to be constantly competitive alongside Giannis.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate. But, I mean, Dante DiVincenzo, even when he was playing, never had a really big role in the Bucks. To my understanding, he was more of a catch-and-shoot 3-and-D player.
Yeah, but he was a starter.
Hit your threes. He was a starter. But he might have some more room to play on the Kings. Like, he will be able to kind of be more of what I'm sure he wants to be as a player, even though it may not lead to quite as much winning as he would have had starting for the Bucks.
Yeah, the win percentage will go down a little bit for sure.
Yeah, but for a whole 4-team trade, 9 players, 3 picks, I'm kind of neutral about almost the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody got I don't think anybody got an extremely good package or got way better. But
I think
sometimes
the Pistons had the worst end of that trade because I don't think Marvin Bagley's very good, but I guess you take a shot on him.
I was gonna say I think the Pistons got the second best end of that trade behind the Kings getting DiVincenzo.
Like if Marvin Bagley ends up turning into who they expected him to be when the Kings drafted him second overall, then I guess it's a great trade for the Pistons, and you might
Well,
as well take that shot.
he
But
doesn't even have to do that. He just has to turn into an Andrew Wiggins caliber player, and the Pistons still got something.
right, yeah, you're taking a shot on a young player who hasn't been much where they expected him, but had that potential.
Because
So
all the Pistons gave up in that deal was Josh Jackson and a second round pick. So if Bagley turns into Wiggins or Wiggins caliber player, then you're set.
right,
So that brings us to what I think is one of the best deals on the deadline day, which is the Hornets added Montrezl Harrell in exchange for Vernon Carey Jr., Ish Smith, and a second round pick.
yeah, I don't understand this trade for the Wizards really either. Obviously, Ish Smith wasn't really a big part of this trade. He's 33 years old, averaging 4.5 points. So hopefully the Wizards aren't hoping for a whole lot out of Ish Smith.
Right.
So I had to Google who Vernon Carey Jr. was because I figured, well, he's got to be kind of the centerpiece that the Wizards are getting back.
Right.
And Vernon Carey Jr. is 20 years old, and I guess the Wizards are taking a shot on a young player. He's only played 4 games this season.
Okay.
So I guess the Wizards are really just taking a chance on Vernon Carey Jr. But I
Well,
think
and again, moving salary because they brought in Porzingis, right?
right. I think they gave up clearly the best player in the trade for not much back. So I really like it for the Hornets. I feel like they didn't give up very much to get a solid center. Um, but I do not like it at all for the Wizards.
I love it for the Hornets. LaMelo Ball, Terry Rozier, Gordon Hayward, Miles Bridges, and Montrezl Harrell. Because before that, that was Plumlee, and you can, if you watch, I watch a lot of Hornets games because my whole fantasy basketball team is the Hornets. But if you watch, Plumlee at center was their biggest issue, both offensively and defensively. Like he's just not an NBA quality starting center. So Harrell, who has been like a 6-man type player, I believe he is an NBA quality starting center, like just an average starting center for the NBA. So to put him in exchange of Plumlee, who was just not getting the job done, and now you have all 5 Hornets starters who, well, I guess other than Harrell, but like 4 of the 5 Hornets starters can drop 25 on a given night. And then all Harrell needs to do is play good defense and set good screens because the other 4 guys can each drop 25.
I think Harrell could even drop 25 on occasion, but I
You
do
mean
like
like
it
12,
for the
12
Hornets.
dunks and 1 made free throw?
I do like it for the Hornets. I think really their goal right now with LaMelo being so young and even Bridges being young and they don't have a lot of old players on that team is just to make it to the playoffs. So maybe this trade gets them through that play-in game where they can beat, I don't know, Atlanta, if they can even shift up to the 7 or 8 seed and just win one of the playing games, make the first round. They'll lose into the first round to whoever they play in all likelihood.
Right.
But I understand that being the goal for this season. So you strengthen your rotation to make sure you're going to be a playing team, and you just see where that takes you for now, and then you wait until LaMelo gets a little bit better next year, and Miles Bridges gets a little bit better next year, and you see where things go.
No, exactly. And just for context, so last night the Hornets played, and LaMelo had 32 points and 12 assists. Rozier had a triple double. Miles Bridges had 25 points. And then I'm just pulling up Gordon
But
Hayward.
they also played the Pistons. So
Yeah, but they still did it. It still happened. Gordon Hayward was out for the night. And then the other thing, too, is they have Kelly Oubre Jr. off the bench. She's turned into a decent catch and shoot player, like 3 and D, for a bench 3 and D player.
right. They
So I
can
just
there's no doubt the Hornets can score a lot. I question their ability to play good defense.
you don't even need to question it. It's awful. It's hard
So
to their Hornets defense is hard to watch. LaMelo Ball gambles on every single pass. Like just goes. He's a long guard. Obviously, he's like 6'7". He just goes for a steal every single time, and sometimes he gets it. Looks incredible because he throws like a 360 alley oop past to Miles Bridges, and the times he doesn't get it, which is most of the time, hence the term gamble, they get scored on.
right. So I'd imagine that that kind of team would kind of run up the score on bad teams that can't really crush you with the defensive mistakes, and
Right.
then lose to good solid teams. And looking at just their schedule, it seems like that's essentially what's happened. They beat Detroit, lost to Chicago, Toronto, Miami, Cleveland, and Boston. Beat the Lakers, which I guess the Lakers are a bad team. Beat Indiana, then lost to Toronto and Atlanta. It looks like they lose to good teams and beat bad teams.
Right.
Although they won back to back against Milwaukee, so I guess there's that.
Right. Well, and that's like, and just by the nature of the fact that most of their team is young, and they don't have a superstar player, they're going to be up and down, right? So same thing. The Hornets now I think are just in a position to win a playing game, make it to the first round, and I was like they're going to win a first round series.
Right.
But I think, like you said, the goal for them for this season is just to get into the playoffs and get some playoff experience. So whatever they do is fine, and I think adding Harrell gets them there.
Right. And I mean, there's no, like, I'm not trying to be critical of them in terms of they beat bad teams and lose to good teams. The Cavs are the
Well, you're
three
not
seed
wrong.
and do essentially the same thing. They just crush bad teams and are mediocre against good teams.
Right.
So it's like, and that's good enough to get you to the 3 seed. So I got no complaints with that. It's just when you hit the playoff time and all you play are good teams, I question the Hornets' ability to win. I question the Cavs' ability to win.
Right. No, and I think that's a fair assessment. So these next two trades I'm going to tie together just for the sake of time. So the Suns get Torrey Craig and cash considerations in exchange for the Pacers getting Jalen Smith and a 2022 second-round pick. And then the Suns also get Aaron Holiday from the Wizards just for cash considerations. So, just in summary, Suns bring in Torrey Craig, Aaron Holiday, and the Pacers get Jalen Smith.
Yeah, I don't really care.
Yeah, because the Suns already have such a deep rotation with Cam Payne and Cam Johnson off the bench that I'm not even sure Torrey Craig and Aaron Holiday will really play.
Yeah, I guess there's just additional depth. If one of your depth pieces goes out, Aaron Holiday and Torrey Craig are both fine. You can fit them into your rotation, give them some minutes, and they'll be fine role players. So the deal is good for the Suns. I think Jalen Smith was a solid role player too, but
Yep.
all the same.
Yeah. To me,
This
that
is
whole
kind of
deal
a
is just an
nothing
insurance
deal.
policy.
Yeah. It's an insurance policy for the depth pieces on your team maybe getting hurt.
Exactly. So then you want to hit us with the Raptors here?
So the Raptors traded Goran Dragic and a lottery protected first round pick to the Spurs for Thaddeus Young, Drew Eubanks, and a 2022 second.
I don't know much to say about that. Goran Dragic wasn't playing, so obviously we gained something. But Eubanks and Thaddeus Young, I know you mentioned it earlier, but off the bench we already have Precious Achiuwa and Chris Boucher, and now we have Drew Eubanks, Thaddeus Young, and we have Kem Birch.
So for those that don't really know the Raptors all that well, of our top 6 players off the bench, 5 are power forward / centers.
Right.
And
none of them are particularly good.
No, and our best backup guard is Steve Mikhailuk, who doesn't really play.
And
so,
they're still all short, relatively, in terms of like. I don't think we gained. I'll just verify this as I talk here, but I don't think we
Thaddeus
gained
Young
any...
is 6'9", and I think so is Drew Eubanks.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was gonna say. I don't think we gained any like 7-footers, so we still have that same problem. So that trade to me, which obviously didn't really cost us anything either, because Dragic wasn't playing. So that trade doesn't move the needle for me either way. I'm indifferent to it.
Yeah, just a fun fact about the Raptors roster. I'm just going to fact check this. I believe there are 8 players now between 6'8", 6'7", and 6'9".
Switch everything. I guess we're sticking to it. I was hoping we'd pull a Miles Turner or a Montrezl Harrell, or I know there were talks of Porzingis and Robert Williams, actually. I was just hoping we'd pull something for a center, so I'm a little bit disappointed with the Raptors at the trade deadline this year, but it is what it is, I guess.
Of the 15 or 16 players that are technically on the Raptors roster, according to ESPN, 11 of them are between 6'7" and 6'9".
Which is crazy. But you know what?
Which
I
is
maintain,
crazy.
after the DeMar DeRozan, Kawhi Leonard thing, I have infinite trust in Masai to get it done. So,
yeah, you gotta trust Kawhi. Kawhi's given, or not Kawhi, Masai.
Well, I do trust Kawhi. Like, I'd still trust Kawhi, but
Masai has given us no reason to question what he does.
Is this a conspiracy theory? You believe Kawhi's secretly playing for the Raptors, and if we meet the Clippers in the finals, Kawhi will put the ball in his own net a bunch of times?
Kawhi will by accident just be blown by.
Yeah, trust that Kawhi's still for us. No, so I believe in Masai, and I'm relatively indifferent to that trade.
Yeah,
So that
I don't love it, but
yeah, no, fair enough. So that gets us to out of the February 10th, which was deadline day. So now we're on to Feb 9th. So the Jazz acquire Nikhil Alexander-Walker and Hernan Gomez, and then the Blazers get Joe Ingles and Elijah Hughes, and the Spurs get Satoransky and a second, all in a 3-team trade.
I personally think Joe Ingles is good for the Jazz, although he was hurt. So I suppose that Nikhil Alexander Walker isn't hurt, so that's a plus.
Right. The
Um,
Blazers are giving up.
the Blazers are giving up. I don't understand really why Joe Ingles, unless Dame really wanted Joe Ingles for
I
some
think it's a
reason.
salary dump.
Yeah, if it's a salary dump, then all the same. Satoransky to Portland, fine. Um, something I want to touch on: Joe Ingles is possibly the nicest player to ever get traded. I don't know if you saw his tweet.
No, I didn't. That's
I think he basically said, "I'm glad they got something like positive for me. Like go win a championship, boys. I'll be watching."
wow. That's respectable.
And like, good for Joe Ingles. Joe Ingles was really a just solid player without getting traded.
Right.
Nikhil Alexander Walker, I think, is a good player. I'm not sure I've ever seen him play.
He's a role player. He'll get minutes, and they'll be serviceable minutes. I think just for the Jazz, obviously, to trade an injured out for season Joe Ingles to get Nikhil Alexander Walker just adds to their depth a little bit. And same thing with Hernan Gomez. Hernan Gomez might be able to play for the Jazz and play serviceable minutes. And then everything else was just kind of salary dumps and talent rotation and stuff like that.
So Joe Ingles tweeted out a couple days ago. Today hurts. I knew it was a possibility, but I didn't want to believe it. We've been lucky to call this place home for 8 years. I got a lot more to say, but I'm gonna have a beer and relax with some friends. Go get a win, fellas. I'll be watching.
There you go.
So,
Yep.
just a really solid guy.
Yep, super respectable. And I guess you can see why Portland was happy to take him on then.
Yeah, for sure. And
yeah,
Portland made some interesting trades. I liked Nikhil Alexander Walker going to Portland, and then they instantly traded Nikhil Alexander Walker.
Yeah.
So
you didn't get to enjoy that for very long. I think he's obviously the best player in the deal, and yeah, like I said, it just shores up some depth for the Jazz.
Right. I really don't understand the trade for Portland. Getting, I guess, is fine. Elijah Hughes seems like a kind of nothing player in a second. Like
right.
So I haven't loved what Portland has done at this deadline.
Yeah, Portland's confused me at the deadline, but we'll get to that a little bit further on as we have a bigger Portland trade to talk about later on.
This next trade is one I'm very, very excited to talk about. The Heat get 2026 second round pick for KZ Okpala. How do you feel about that trade?
I actually literally don't have anything to say. I don't even know who that. I don't even know who that is, and the second round pick is so far away. I'm not even going to be a student by the time that comes into effect.
I think I've heard the name KZ Okpala before. Yeah, I don't have anything to say either, so we can move on.
Okay, great. So next, we're gonna move on from that one. So this is one of the worst decisions also on deadline day. Like I consider this just as bad as the Philly mess up. So the Pacers add Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson for Domantas Sabonis, Justin Holiday, and Jeremy Lamb in a second round pick. I can't believe the Kings gave up Halliburton.
Okay, I was gonna say before I go in on this, I would like to know which side you think made a bad decision. Because the way you said Halliburton, Buddy Hield, I thought you were saying the Pacers made a bad decision.
I'm so mad.
The Kings just decided, hey, we would really like to be the 10 seed, and let's mortgage the future for it.
Literally, because now De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis doesn't win you anything. But now it's done. So, like you said, they're going to be a 10 seed or something. And they give up Buddy Hield, who's an excellent three-point shooter. And the Pacers in the near future, like next year, are going to flip that to a team like the Lakers or somebody, the Heat, who need a three-point shooter. And they're going to get like maybe a first for Buddy Hield. So then, but giving up Tyrese Halliburton and be like the Raptors just giving up Scotty Barnes right now. Like, don't get me wrong. Sabonis is the best player in the deal. Yes. Sabonis is an all-star player, but they just gave up, like you said, their entire future to bring in Sabonis and be a 10 seed now. Like, it's such a Sacramento thing to do.
Yeah, and it's like, does Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox win you a playing game? Maybe. So it really feels like the Kings just sold out on, hey, let's make the playoffs for the first time in a really long time. And
No,
that's
the
great.
play in.
No, they might win you the play-in game.
They might,
De'Aaron
but they
Fox
might
and
not.
Sabonis might win you the playing game. So they
Yeah,
sold
but
out on like, hey, let's try to make the playoffs. And Tyrese Halliburton might have been their best player. He's 20, maybe 21, but I think 20 years old.
right.
And they just gave him up.
I can't
And
believe it.
it's I think it's a good trade for the Pacers. I'm glad they did it. I was hoping Miles Turner got moved to the Raptors, but so be it.
Yep.
Um,
Well, yeah.
So the Pacers make a good trade for the future. Miles Turner's still young.
Well, that's
Halliburton's
what I mean.
young.
Now they have a team here because they have Miles Turner, who might get a little bit better, and they have Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield.
Yeah, I like the trade for the Pacers.
I
I
love the
hate
trade
the
for the
trade for the
Pacers.
Kings. Like the
Because the
Kings,
Pacers weren't going to win with Sabonis and Brogdon and company.
right? The Pacers were kind of stuck in the, hey, we're gonna make the playoffs and get eliminated in the first round.
Right.
So they gave
Well,
up some of that
not
to
in the Eastern
maybe,
Conference this year, but
yeah. So they gave up some of that to maybe be a little bit worse this year. Hopefully, a little bit better in the future. And the Kings just don't make any sense. But the Kings are
and
gonna be the Kings, and that's just how that is, I guess.
to exhaust one final point on how bad this deal was, Tyrese Halliburton loved Sacramento, which nobody
Halliburton
loves
was like
Sacramento.
yeah.
He was the poster boy for like I'm gonna turn Sacramento around and put them on my back. Like he was literally Damian Lillard in Portland like 5, 6, 7 years ago, where he was like, I'm just going to make this work on my own. And then he went, okay, no, you're not. Joke's on you. And they traded him. Like, it's almost like they had bet money on whether or not Tyrese Halliburton was going to turn Sacramento around. And the way to guarantee the win of the bet was just to trade him.
Yeah, so Tyrese, just for reference, he was having a good season. He's 20 years old. He didn't come in as like a highly touted rookie or anything like that. But he was averaging 14, 7.5 assists, 4 rebounds, and shooting 41% from three.
41% from three, and a 20-year-old averaging almost 8 assists.
It's an
With
almost
crappy
inexplicable
teammates.
trade for the Kings. Again, like you said, the Kings get the best player right now and will maybe make the playing game. I'm just looking at they're the 13 seed right now. So they're not too far out of a playing spot, but
Well, even if they don't
man.
make the playing game this year, they could be in competition for it next year.
Yeah, and Sabonis is still young. I think Sabonis is 25. But man, the Kings, this might be the least I like any trade for any team.
Oh, I can't believe it. It makes me so mad. Okay, so that brings us to change the topic a little bit. That brings us to the Pelicans adding C.J. McCollum, Larry Nance, and Tony Snell, and the Blazers adding Josh Hart, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Thomas Satoransky, who we just talked about. They've already flipped, and then Didi Luzauda, and then a 2022 first round pick, a 2026, and a 2027 second round pick, whichever is better between the two teams, so they can pick swap.
Right. So in terms of this trade, it ends up being, if you include the other trade, CJ McCollum, Larry Nance, and Tony Snell for Joe Ingles, Elijah Hughes, 3 seconds and a first. And
That's
Josh
not
Hart.
bad to me.
I don't love it. I don't really understand it. I liked it more when they were getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think
Right.
Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a good player. I think Josh Hart is a solid player. I like Tomas Satoransky a little bit. But then they traded all of them except for Josh Hart. So I don't like they wanted to rebuild this roster around Dame for next year. And currently you still have Anthony Simons, which you had before this deadline started. And
Well,
haven't really gotten much in return. You traded CJ McCollum, Robert Covington, and Norm Powell. And
well,
you got
the Norm Powell
pick.
thing and Robert Covington thing was bad. I'm just talking about the CJ thing specifically.
Yeah.
But they're betting on they're done with CJ, right? Because they're betting on Anthony Simons to be the new CJ.
Right. it's just inexplicable to me that you trade three quality to good NBA starters and get one first round pick back. And the first round pick is protected. And then the best player I think you got back in either trade, you immediately trade away for a worse player.
Well, Josh Hart is 13
Good.
points, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists.
Right.
So he's not terrible. Like, he's
No,
having
Josh
a pretty
Hart's
good year. And he can defend well. So, like, I don't think, obviously, like, they didn't get. Forgetting, I have to move on from the Norman Powell, Robert Covington thing because they just didn't get enough value on that.
Yeah,
But
that
in
was
this
awful.
specific deal, I think they got enough back for CJ because assuming Josh Hart can turn into something a little bit better. Because well, I guess he's 26, so he's probably as good as he's going to get. But I think just they've committed to Anthony Simons. Now, whether or not they move on from Dame as well and decide to make Anthony Simons the new Dame or keep Anthony Simons as the new CJ, we'll have to wait and see.
Right. I actually do, moving past the Blazers side of this trade, I do like it for the Pelicans. Pelicans are the 10 seed right now. Obviously, their issue was defense, and I don't think this trade helped them unless Tony Snell is going to get a lot of playing time and turn into the Tony Snell from the Green Grand Grizzlies 7 years ago.
I'd like to weigh in. I think the Pelicans' bigger issue is that their number 1 draft pick doesn't play basketball.
But if we assume for a second that Zion comes back healthy, and this is Zion that we saw, the starting lineup for the Pelicans becomes, I don't even know who the starting point guard is. Devontae Graham, CJ, Brandon Ingram, Zion, and Valanciunas.
I know they're sneakily good. I was looking at that the other day when the trade happened, and I was like, "Wait, the Pelicans are actually okay here. Like they've got a roster."
So if they get healthy, like that's that's not a team I want to play against. I don't know how good that team is, but it looks good on paper at least.
The other thing too is the Pelicans have Herbert Jones, who is up and coming,
Nasty.
and he's been able to like play phenomenal defense, and actually also they've been able to get serviceable minutes out of him. So if you put in the starting 5, and then they have Jackson Hayes as well, which they might. I guess right now he's the bench center. They might be able to move on from him. We'll have to wait and see. And then they also have Herbert Jones. If they can pick up like another Devontae Graham level player in free agency or something, they have Larry Nance too. Then,
Right.
assuming Zion plays, then they're okay.
It looks like a solid team that has one good defender on it.
Well, yeah.
So if they can learn to play any defense, maybe they can give some teams a run for their money in the playoffs. I don't think they're really very good, and I don't think they'll be able to get out of play-in seeding because they're a long way from the 6th seed right now,
Right.
which will put them against Golden State or Phoenix in the first round, and I can't imagine they beat Golden State or Phoenix.
I think you're correct. But I think if Zion comes back and is an all-star level player, then the Pelicans are like a mid-tier Western Conference team, like a 6th seed.
Yeah, the Pelicans become a good but not great team, and Pelicans haven't been good since Anthony Davis. So
Yeah. Well, no, and that's a win for them. Davis Cousins, what a duo that was. That's another thing that we never got to see 100%. But
now Cousins is basically out of the league. He's like maybe barely playing for the Bucks, I think.
Yeah, do you remember when like the fantasy studs were Cousins and Drummond because they were both like 22 and 22 every night?
DeMarcus Cousins averaged like 26, 12, and 4 or something, and he was ridiculous.
Yeah, like
but
he really fell off.
Now him and Anthony Davis are both bad.
Well, Anthony Davis, I think, is temporarily bad.
Anthony Davis is kind of picking it back up for the first time in his career. In a game he played in for more than 5 minutes, he didn't take a shot in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, that was bad. And just for the record, in that same game, Anthony Simons was clutch in the fourth quarter. He hit like 3 big threes to just drown the Lakers out of the game.
So I would just like to give just a reference point before we move on to the last trade we have for you guys on how bad the Lakers are right now. So the Lakers are 26 and 30. Portland is 22 and 34, and Orlando is 13 and 44. So in terms of that, the Trailblazers, who had just played Orlando and lost by 18, the very next day played the Lakers and won.
Which is awesome. I love And LeBron's averaging LeBron in an interview after the Portland game was like, yeah, I just want to drink wine and go to bed. Like that's actually what he said. And the fact that that's the position the Lakers are in now, where LeBron's averaging I don't know, 60 points, 13 rebounds, 40 assists, and they can't win the basketball game because Russell Westbrook's averaging 40 turnovers on 18% from three.
For every assist LeBron gets, Russell Westbrook throws the ball to the other team.
Well, Russell Wilson also threw the ball to the other team, which is a point for a different day.
we don't diminish what Russell Wilson is on this podcast. Russell Wilson's my guy. We stay away from criticizing him.
I think he's the Patriots guy.
Was 7-8 years ago, Drew. Move on.
That's still one of my favorite football moments that I actively remember. And they had Marshawn Lynch.
Moving on from that pain for me as a Seahawks fan, we will move on.
Prime Marshawn Lynch. Okay, anyway, sorry, move on.
We'll move on to the last trade before we get back to the Powell Covington trade, which we covered, I believe, last week.
Yeah.
Karis LeVert to the Cavs with a second-round pick for Ricky Rubio to the Pacers. Lottery protected first and 2 seconds.
I think it's a great trade I'm going to say it's a great trade for both teams. Obviously, now that we know that the Pacers brought in Halliburton to replace LeVert, which is just a younger, probably soon to be better LeVert. Great. And then also, so the Cavs started the season with Garland, Sexton, and Rubio. So they had 3 ball handlers, and then Sexton was out for season, so then they had Garland and Rubio, so they had 2 ball handlers. And then Rubio went out for the season, so then they had Garland, and then the rest of it is Okoro, Markin, Mobley, and Allen, which is a combined 0 for ball handling ability. So they definitely 100% needed somebody who can create their own shot off the bounce and frankly just bring the ball up the court. So moving an injured, out for season Rubio, and then a whole bunch of picks, and the first round pick is lottery protected, and bringing in an actual scoring guard who can handle the ball, I think, was just the right decision for them because the way the East is and how unbalanced and uncertain the East is, I think the Cavs are kind of in the mix enough.
Right. And I do like this trade for, again, both teams. Ricky Rubio, I feel like in terms of passing, can help Tyrese get better. Pacers get picks. Karis LeVert is a solid player, a good scorer. And again, secondary ball handler for the Cavs, and I think it makes both teams better. The Cavs now and the Pacers later. So,
yeah, no, that one works out for me just in terms of, and like I mentioned earlier, just making room for Halliburton to really be the starting shooting guard and the main ball handler. So that brings us through all of the trades. Not only on deadline day, but all, as Jared mentioned, all the way back to the Norman Powell trade that we covered last week. So that gets us all the way through that. So then there's one trade that we didn't bring up, which is, I wanted to skip over this one because I find it specifically funny and I wanted to cover it at the end with its own moment here. So the Magic bring in PJ Dozier, a future second-round pick, cash considerations, in Bol in exchange for a 2023 second-round pick. Now, that trade might seem insignificant, but the Magic have an opportunity to do something special here because they now have Mo Bamba and Bol. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, that's a team you make in 2K. I acquire both those guys for my 2K roster because if you put them on power forward and center, they can block every shot because they both have crazy long arms and they're just long players overall, and they can score around the rim for the same reason. So Mo Bamba and Bol is you're starting power forward and center in a 2K game. But the Magic, in typical Magic fashion, are what if we just have Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, Mo Bamba, and Bol, and we see what happens.
Yeah, and honestly, because Boston need to get out of salary, Orlando just flip second round picks, switch second round picks with Boston, and just got Bol and PJ Dozier for nothing. What harm is there for the Magic?
Exactly. So that was one of my favorite trades on deadline day, and I hope that they start them both at least one game. To watch the short guards on the other team cower in fear that they might have to attack the paint with Bol Bol and Mo Bamba down there.
Uh,
So then that brings us to the tweet of the week, which Jared's got ready to go.
So a few episodes ago, I can't remember which episode it was in. My tweet of the week was an old tweet from NBA Twitter. It was from 2018. I think CJ McCollum posted something on Twitter, and somebody named Jennifer replied and said, "Win a playoff game, then talk." And CJ McCollum replied, "I'm trying, Jennifer." And so recently, here's a quote from CJ McCollum via the Players Tribune talking about his time in Portland. And it says, "Maybe we didn't reach our ultimate goal. That's basketball. That's life. But darned it if we didn't try, Jennifer."
Got him.
Got him.
CJ a little bit salty to be leaving Portland.
So that's
honestly, though,
my tweet of the week.
Portland for New Orleans, not bad, because New Orleans is a good city, and Portland's kind of way up on the west coast there. So
Yep.
that's not a bad movement geographically for them. Like if I'm CJ, I'd take it.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
Go from the Pacific Northwest to the South. That doesn't seem too bad to me.
No, see, it seems okay.
Yeah, I think he'll get over the whole and you get away from Jennifer. So
hopefully Jennifer will stop bothering him.
Yeah, hopefully Jennifer stop bothering him on Twitter now that he's gone and out of town. So that's all we can pray for CJ McCollum on that one. So that's all we've got on the In the Clutch podcast for this week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.